All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into a field that tries to connect two things that don't always seem to go together, faith and science. We're going to start by looking at how researchers are using brain scans to try and understand spiritual experiences. Then, we'll see how that same knowledge is being put to use in a really practical way to train our minds for better mental health. It's a journey, really, from the cosmos of belief right down to the clinic. So let's get into it.
So right off the bat, here's the big provocative question. Can science actually read a spiritual mind? I mean, can you put someone in an fMRI machine and actually see a feeling of transcendence? It honestly sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but it's the very real ambition of a pretty fascinating and, you guessed it, controversial field. And that field has a name: neurotheology. It's a really bold, some might even say audacious, attempt to connect two worlds that, let's be honest, rarely speak the same language. You've got the empirical world of neuroscience on one side and the spiritual world of theology on the other.
So, what are we really talking about here? Well, Andrew Newberg, who's a huge name in this area, defines it as the link between neuroscience and religion. But it's about so much more than just looking at brain scans during prayer. It's about using the tools of science to tackle those enormous questions. What is consciousness? What is the nature of reality?
The sheer scale of this idea is just wow. It's what's so captivating about it. Newberg isn't just saying science and religion should have a chat. No, he's proposing what he calls a mega-theology, basically a unified theory of everything built on two things that pretty much all humans share: a brain and that tendency we have to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
That's a grand vision, for sure. But how on earth do you even begin to test it? How do you get a scientific snapshot of something as deeply personal as a spiritual experience? Well, that's where the technology comes in. Let's take a look at the tools of the trade.
Researchers have this whole toolkit they use to peek inside the brain while it's working, and most of these techniques work by tracking blood flow, which is a really good proxy for brain activity. So you have SPECT and PET scans, which are kind of like GPS trackers for your brain's energy use. fMRI measures oxygen levels in the blood, and then DAT scan hones in on specific brain chemicals like dopamine. Each tool gives us a slightly different piece of a very complex puzzle.
And this right here gives you a fantastic idea of what these experiments actually look like. You have someone lying inside an fMRI scanner, and they're asked to do something, maybe a creative task. By comparing the brain's activity during that task to its normal resting state, scientists can start to map out which parts of the brain are firing up and, just as importantly, which parts are quieting down.
Okay, now let's look at some of the actual data. This table is super interesting. It shows what's happening in the brain during two different types of Islamic prayer. Now, notice the negative numbers for the prefrontal and parietal lobes. That means there's a decrease in activity. These are the parts of your brain that help you focus and orient yourself in space. So a decrease in activity there, well, that might just correlate with that feeling of losing your sense of self in the moment of prayer. And then look at the thalamus, the brain's sensory switchboard. It's doing completely different things depending on the type of prayer. This is a great hint that not all spiritual experiences look the same in the brain.
And here's where it gets really counterintuitive. You'd probably think that a really complex spiritual practice would light up the brain like a Christmas tree, right? But that's not always what happens. Take psychographers. These are people who practice automatic writing. It turns out the more experienced they are, the less their brain seems to be working. Even while their writing gets more complex, it's almost like their brain has found this super efficient, effortless way to perform the task.
Now, of course, not everyone is sold on this brain is everything view of spirituality. The idea that a profound, mystical experience can just be boiled down to blood flow in a few brain regions, well, that doesn't sit right with a lot of people. Which brings us to a huge question. Is the brain really the only place we should be looking?
Critic Nathaniel F. Barrett uses this really powerful metaphor to explain the neurotheological view. He says it's like we're trapped inside our own skulls, and our brain is the only window we have to see the world. So logically, if you want to understand what's out there, you have to understand the window itself. But what if that window isn't the whole story?
So this slide really breaks down the two opposing views. On one side, you have the idea that the brain is the command center, the filter for everything. But on the other side, critics argue that our minds aren't just contained in our heads, they're extended and embodied. That means our thoughts, our feelings, are all shaped by our physical bodies and our surroundings. I mean, think about it. You don't just think with your brain, you think with your whole being, in a real environment.
So the bottom line from the critics is this: neurotheology is just too focused on the brain.
By zooming in so much on brain scans, it risks missing the bigger picture, our bodies, our culture, our relationships. And if you ignore all of that, you might end up with a very narrow, very incomplete understanding of what it means to be a spiritual person.
Okay, so this whole debate is absolutely fascinating. But now let's switch gears a little. Let's look at how our growing understanding of the brain is being used in an incredibly practical way. We're moving from these big philosophical ideas to the clinic, into the world of neurofeedback.
And here is a real-world example. This is a 16-week training syllabus for a neurofeedback system called BrainPaint. Think of neurofeedback as like physical therapy for your brain. It literally teaches you how to regulate your own brain waves. And as you can see, it's a very structured, serious program. We're going to zoom in on week 5, because that's when trainees get their hands on the actual technology.
So what exactly happens in week 5? Well, this is where the rubber really meets the road. It's not just theory anymore. Trainees get hands-on with the hardware, the amplifier that reads brainwaves, the EEG sensors, all the accessories. They learn the BrainPaint software inside and out. But most importantly, they learn the entire process, the complete workflow of running a session with a client, from the minute they walk in, to setup, to the end of the session.
And they don't just throw people into the deep end. There's this very clear, staged approach to learning. You start as an observer, just watching and taking notes, then you practice on mock setups. Pretty soon you're assisting on real sessions under direct supervision, all the way up to being an advanced trainee. The name of the game here is safety and competence.
And this is where you can see just how practical this all is. Before any neurofeedback even starts, clients are screened using established clinical tools for specific issues like PTSD, anxiety, or depression. This isn't some vague, feel-good therapy. It's a targeted, data-driven approach to helping people with their mental health.
So we've gone all the way from the really big, bold ideas of neurotheology to the actual nuts and bolts of clinical neurofeedback. It's pretty clear that this whole field is still figuring itself out. We're working with an unfinished map of the mind, and that map is constantly being redrawn.
We started this whole journey with the biggest questions you can ask, right? What is consciousness? What is the fundamental nature of reality? These are the exact same questions that have fueled both spiritual quests and scientific investigations for centuries.
And we ended up in a very different, very concrete place, a clinic, where people are learning to literally regulate their own brainwaves to heal from things like trauma and anxiety. It's such a powerful reminder that this quest to understand the mind isn't just some academic exercise. It really has the potential to change people's lives.
And that leaves us with a question that's both scientific and really philosophical. As our maps of the brain get more and more detailed, what are we actually looking at? Are we just seeing the hardware of the mind, the echoes of a soul, or is it something else entirely? One thing seems certain. The map is not the territory, and we've only just begun to explore.